Welcome to the Profile Corner. In the early 2000s, I purchased my large Delta Unisaw at an auction. It was actually an auction for a school, and they were looking to get rid of it. I don't know if they were completely eliminating their woodshop program at that time, or if they were replacing the old equipment maybe with some newer equipment, such as saw stop equipment. However, at that same auction, they also get rid of a large 24-inch Delta Rockwell planer, and so I'm assuming that they were completely getting rid of their wood shop. That saw originally had a 5 horsepower 3-phase motor in it, and when I bought it, I knew that it had a 3-phase motor in it and that I would have to replace it. And so I actually replaced that motor with a 3 horsepower Baldor motor, and unfortunately the Unisaw motors have a special frame style. And so you can't just stick any kind of a motor onto those saws. It has to have the matching frame style. And Baldor at the time was the company that offered a motor. I believe I bought it through Amazon. And it was right around, I believe, $350 or so at that time. There may be other motors that are available now, maybe from Marathon or another company like that are around $1,000. For a 3 horsepower motor that'll fit those Unisaws. I believe that Grizzly also sells a foreign-made motor that'll fit the Unisaw. So if you're interested in trying to get a single-phase motor for an older Delta Unisaw, that may be an option for you to go through Grizzly. When I bought that saw, it had some issues. And one of those issues is that the 52-inch rip fence had some problems. This is the bar for the 52-inch rip fence, or the arm for the fence. And as you can see here, it met the blade a couple times, and then it looks like somebody tried to patch those holes using something like Bondo. And that didn't really work. I didn't really like that. And so I ended up replacing this piece with a new piece, and I'll be showing you that in just a moment here. And in addition to that, it also had a unique handle that it looks like they crafted in the wood shop, and I didn't really like that. This is the elevation crank handle, and so I contacted Delta and I asked them to send me out a new elevation crank, and that's when I found out the age of the Unisaw, which was right around 1988. Or it may have been in 1987. I can't recall exactly because it's been quite a few years since I called Delta about it. And so I replaced this as well. And this was not a cheap purchase, but I wanted to do it so that the saw looked nice. Because I was already paying the money for the motor replacement, so I might as well do it as well as the replacement for this. And in addition to that, when I put the motor on the saw, I also bought some Fenner drives, link belts for the saw. And I did that so that hopefully there would be no vibration and that the belts would not develop any kind of a set to them. And when I bought the second Unisaw, which was manufactured in 1982, I found a company on eBay that was selling match set Fenner drives link belts. And so I bought those after finding that the match set regular type of belts sold through Amazon that are made in China, they weren't actually a match set. And so they had actually introduced quite a bit of vibration into the saw. And so I replaced those with the Fenner drives link belt, and I haven't had any difficulty with them. Okay, so let's head over to that table saw, and I'll go through the different upgrades that I did to that table saw. 2 years ago, I was trying to make the saw safer to use. So I think that safety is important, and I got kind of fond of having my fingers attached to my hand, and so I thought that I would look for different ways that I could upgrade that saw to make it safer to use. Okay, as I mentioned, I replaced the original 5 horsepower 3-phase motor with a Baldor 3 horsepower motor, and that motor is stronger than the 3 horsepower motor that Delta originally sold in these Unisaws. And so that's maybe a concern for you if you have the original Delta 3 horsepower Unisaw motor, that it may not have as much strength as some of the other motors. And also I installed, of course, the Fenner drives link belts. I replaced the broken elevation crank, and I replaced the Unisaw fence arm with a Peachtree woodworking supply Uni-T-Fence, which is this right here. It has plastic essentially on the front of it, so if you run the blade into it, all that you've got to do is replace this plastic. I've never run the blade into the plastic, so I haven't had that concern yet. And this has worked out real well compared with the original Unifence style, because it allows me to put stop blocks clamped onto this fence very easily, and also allows certain types of attachments to attach onto the top of it. I mentioned in an earlier video that I'll be getting a replacement for this called a Rip It 2.0, which is an automated table saw fence. I've had it on order through Kickstarter for the last 2 years, and it's supposed to ship out in roughly about 2 months. It was originally supposed to ship in March of 2024. What that Rip It 2 will do is allow you to key in where you want the fence to move, and it'll automatically move to that location. And if you want it to step over 3/4 of an inch, you just hit the step over button and tell it how many inches to move over, and it'll automatically shift over. And you hit the button again, and it'll shift over again 3/4 of an inch. And that way you wouldn't have to use a thin rip guide on the table saw. You could just use the capabilities built into the rip fence. And as I said, that'll hopefully be coming in about 2 months after a 1.5 year delay. In addition to this, I had to create a new table board, and as you can see here, I had it extend back. It looks like it's extending back roughly 14 inches beyond the back of the table to allow additional outfeed support. And then this has got a 52-inch rip fence on it, and so I had to have the table board go all the way across. And so that gives me a large surface area up here where I can put all sorts of different things that get in the way when I try to use the rip fence. Now I've got a Forrest Woodworker 2 saw blade mounted into here. This is a 40-tooth regular kerf, and I actually bought one of these blades probably about 23 years ago, and this is another blade that I bought roughly 2 years ago. This one's cut a couple steel nails and some other things, and so this may not be quite as sharp as the other blade that hasn't been sharpened yet. But this still does a very decent job, and it leaves a finish that looks almost as if it had been sanded, as long as you hold the board down to the table very well. And as a matter of fact, with this saw, if I'm ripping wood, I have a Ridge Carbide 24-tooth rip blade that if I hold down the wood very well when I push it through, then that blade also produces a surface that looked like it had been sanded. A lot of that is thanks to these guides that I've got back here. These are JessEm 04301 clear cut stock guides. These help to hold the material down to the table, and then also help to pull the material into the fence. And so they help to eliminate kickback, because these wheels down here will only turn in one direction. I tried to force a kickback on this saw in one of the videos, the Surfacing Four Sides video, and these prevented the board from shifting backward when I tried to force the kickback. And so that worked out real well. I also had, roughly 2 years ago, I found a product called a Delta Disappearing Splitter, or it was also commonly referred to as a pop-up splitter. I found that on Amazon for just less than $100. It may have been about $86 or so, and it fit right down into here, and you could sink it down below the table surface whenever you were trying to do a dado cut, and you could bring it back up when you're done doing that dado cut, and it was very easy to do. I've got that currently mounted over on my contractor saw. Before I put it over onto the contractor saw, I actually moved it over to my other Unisaw before I had a blade guard on that other Unisaw. So that pop-up splitter, that was the stopgap to getting this particular blade guard. This was kind of an expensive purchase. I think it was right around $360 when I bought this one. And when I bought the one for the other Unisaw, I believe it was over $420. This is a Shark Guard Delta Arc package. It has a 3-inch inlet on the top for you to be able to hook up dust collection. And I'm not yet using that, but I hope to be using that soon. I've been extremely happy with this because it's very easy to take off whenever you need to take it off. It just takes a matter of a couple seconds, and then it has a built-in splitter, and with another couple seconds you can take that right out. So if you need to make dado cuts, you can do that, and then when you get done with the dado cuts, you just put the splitter back in, set this back on top, like so, after you get your zero clearance insert installed. And the zero clearance insert is another upgrade that I did to the saw to help make sure that I got good quality cuts and I didn't risk having wood fall down in between the blade and the plate that was originally installed. And so now to just reinstall this, it takes less than 30 seconds to put it back on if you're not trying to talk into a camera at the same time. So this is a Delta Arc package from Shark Guard. It's an extremely popular package and it gives extremely good visibility, as you can see through the side here, and I can also see straight down where that blade is at without having to lift this up. And of course I can always lift it up and tilt it off to the side like that if I need to do an alignment for a cut. I also bought a Harvey compass ST1500 sliding table. This is not designed to connect up to the Unisaw. However, I was able to drill some holes in the side of this table and then use the holes that were pre-drilled into this unit for, I believe it was a saw stop, and then I could mount this onto the side of the table. I did have to put in a shim right back here. I don't recall what the thickness of the shim is, and that's because the side of this table is not square to the blade. And so I had to add in a very small shim right down in here to be able to mount this. Now this particular Harvey compass, ST1500, it goes on sale quite frequently. I found it after watching the sales on Harvey's website and what they were sending out to me daily. I found where they offered this for $1,099 with free shipping, and I jumped on it on that day. And then it also came with a special clamp that hooks down into the slot here that you can use to hold down your wood onto the surface if you need to use that. And that was an addition to this particular unit when they raised their price up. That was probably about a year ago, maybe more than that. And I really struggled with trying to drill into the side of this table. And it was not so much the drilling, but the thought of actually drilling into this table that had me worried. But I used some DeWalt drill bits, and it went right through this cast iron quite easily. And I did it all freehand drilling. And surprisingly, I got very close. I only had to open up the one hole down here to make it a little bit taller so that this would fit on. And of course this has to be fitted onto the table so that it's a couple thousandths of an inch higher than the surface of the table here, so that when you've got the wood on here, it actually stays planted on this surface instead of going on to this surface and sliding all around. This has been a nice feature. This gives me a 4-foot wide crosscut capacity, or slightly wider than that, so I can actually crosscut a 4-foot wide 4x8 sheet of plywood on this saw now. And of course, with the 52-inch rip fence, I can also cut that 4x8 sheet of plywood in half the long way. And so that's been a nice feature. I don't know that I've really used that feature beyond maybe 36 inches or so, but it's been nice to have the capacity if I ever need it. Okay, so in addition to having this Harvey compass, which is really a bear to set up at 90 degrees, you got to use feeler gauges and super small feeler gauges, and then I've got a C-clamp down here to hold the position, just so that it doesn't get out of square. And then if I ever have to change this fence so that it's at an angle other than 90 degrees, I have a board that sits on here. It's actually a sheet of plywood, and it sits down into these slots, and that helps me align this fence again to 90 degrees. Because once again, it is a bit of a bear to do that. But before I had this, I actually bought an Ikra 3000 SE miter gauge. And this is a pretty nice miter gauge. It's made in the United States. Really, the only two things that I don't like about it is that it has this big assembly coming out the back, which kind of gets in the way once in a while. And also, this bar is not terribly long. I'm sure it is longer than some miter gauges, but it's not as long as what it would be nice to have. Maybe another 2 inches or so out here would be nice. But this does a really nice job, and I can use this for doing 45-degree miter cuts, whereas I can't quite get this Harvey sliding table to go to 45 degrees because I still have the table extension mounted onto the side of the cast iron table of the Delta Unisaw. If I had removed that, then I could probably turn this to 45 degrees and actually make a cut with it. So this works out pretty nice, and of course I can use this on another saw as well. And with a block on here, I've got a zero clearance, so I can see exactly where the cut's going to be made. And so that's kind of nice. And of course this also has a nice stop on it, just like the Harvey has. But you've got to watch for, if you're going to get one of these Harvey compasses, you got to watch for months on end until the right sale comes up where they give you free shipping as well as a discount on accessories like this. Otherwise, you're going to be paying quite a bit of money for shipping as well as for this particular unit. Okay, a couple of years ago, I finally got around to building a cabinet that goes under this wing, and I'll show you some close-ups of it, but it has some very nice drawers, and I use quarter joints for putting these drawers together instead of using something like a dovetail. That was the first time I tried a quarter, and I was using a digital caliper to dial it in on the table saw, and I ended up getting it so close to perfect that the joints almost didn't go together right. I had to use my steel eye-bar clamps to actually draw the joints together because of how close the tolerances were when I created it. So if you're making quarter joints, maybe you want to go a little more loose than what I went for this. But I've got some very nice large drawers here. And on the other side here, I have two very tall drawers. And built into one of those drawers is a blade storage unit that allows me to store 5 different blades and to have easy access to them. So that I've got access to my rip blade, my other Forrest Woodworker 2 blade. I've got a Delta blade that came with the Rockwell Unisaw. And also I've got a gripper down here, actually 2 of those, that I haven't really used. And these I picked up also for additional safety. And of course, to be able to use these as they're designed, you can't have this blade guard on because you're supposed to run this directly over the top of the blade or to the side of the blade, and I'd never liked doing that. I do like having this blade guard on. I went many years without having a blade guard on any of my saws. But as I said, I've gotten kind of attached to my fingers, and so I want to keep it that way. And so I've got a blade guard that I put on anytime that I can on the saws. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a Rip It 2 on order, and hopefully that'll be showing up at some point. So these are the upgrades that I made to my Delta Unisaw that was manufactured in 1988. And I made these upgrades not only to increase the safety of the saw, but also to increase the capacity and the ability to work with large objects. And if you have a Delta Unisaw, or you find one at a cheap price, you may want to pick one up. These are high quality saws, and if you install a blade guard on the saws, they're quite safe to use. You may not have to go to buying a saw stop if you want to save your fingers. Just use a blade guard that's well made like this one. Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.